Hey, welcome everybody to our last week of the 21-day spring cleanse. Congratulations. You're upright, you're conscious, you're relatively happy, and maybe a little snappy at times, as we all get to do and be when things change inside the microbiome. All normal. I told you to warn your family before you started this that things were going to get a little hinky for a few days, so that's fine. You're doing fine. So today I wanted to just talk about again what we're doing. You know, we spend so much time talking about the food and how to manage what we're putting in, and now we're talking about the BOSTI, and in a few days we're going to be talking about what's coming out. You know, so there's this, hyper focus on the GI tract, and the reason is in Ayurveda, it's the ringmaster of your circus. Your entire circus is run by one thing only, and it's your gut. It's the king of everything. All the decisions are made in your gut. And as much as I'd like to tell you that you're a masterful human being making masterful choices, the truth of the matter is you're only about 1% human. The things that are making your decisions are actually microbial. And we live in alliance with these microbes, or you can call them bacteria, that make all of our systems work, from our eyelashes, to our toenails and everything on the inside. It all run by this wonderful symbiosis that we have developed as humans in an environment with the microbes around us that make us possible. If you take those microbes away, we are not possible. And so we're starting to see the results of that in our health care over the year. We have actually now connected things like autism, schizophrenia, all kinds of mental disorders to a dysbiosis, a microbiome disruption, even obesity. Now we have linked to a complete void of 2 or 3 very important microbes that are no longer existing in the gut of a woman who struggles with obesity, who eats half of the calories, as a woman who does not struggle with obesity and eats twice as much. So it really is not the intake, is what I'm trying to say. All of what we're doing is not about necessarily what you're eating. It's about how you're training the gut to behave after all of this. So, fun facts. There's a lot of disease in our world caused by a dysbiosis. If we were to correct the microbes in our gut, we could shut down most hospitals. If we could correct hydration, we would shut down the rest of the hospitals. So that is one of the reasons why there is not a lot of attention paid to hydration and microbial balance, because there's no money in it. We as children were naturally drawn to eating things dirty. Being in a mud bath and making mud pies was a completely normal, healthy thing to do. My parents actually sent my brother out to the mud patch, to play and have a good time, and we ingested a whole lot of that stuff. The other thing that is kind of an unfortunate fact is that if you look at the one that says Canada and Yemen, 25% of the population is suffering with diseases having to do with microbiome disruption, versus the rest of the world is at roughly at 10%. So what do Canada and Yemen have in common that their disruption would be so high? Really nothing. Yemen is the most war-torn country in all of history. It has the longest record of war, homelessness, poverty, murder, transients of any country. And the war is not ended, and it's still there. And they have the same amount of GI disorders as Canadians do. So that tells us a whole lot about how stress and environment contribute to how your microbes are balanced. Some of the diseases that we see in a environment here, there's many more than just this, but these are some common things that you've probably heard about from your friends and neighbors of common problems having to do with GI imbalance. And the causes of all of them are one thing, a dysbiotic gut bacteria. The microbiome for some reason has been disrupted. Some colonies are too much, too populated, and other colonies are too little. The causes of that, look all the way at the bottom, nobody is cleaning out their gut, but all in between there, you have medications that actually kill microbes, gastric surgery, gastric bypasses, they remove all the wonderful bacteria that contribute to your T cell development, your immune system. So gastric bypass, folks who've made that decision suffer a great deal. Pollution, pesticides, food deserts. But I write food deserts. Yeah, I meant food deserts. Addiction, stress, social pressures, habits, traditions. We talked a little bit about habits and traditions, how they're not always in our favor. And then basically inaccurate information. And this can be anything from looking at TikTok and finding just the right juice, you know, the right smoothie for the morning, or drink this before bed, you know. Those kinds of things are dangerous, because one of the things that I get a lot of questions about is, should I be drinking apple cider vinegar before bed in order to correct my microbiome? And my answer is, I don't know. It depends on what your constitution is. If you're Pitta, no, you should not be having vinegar at night or in the day or in the morning or ever. It's too acidic. We would correct your situation in a different way than we would correct a Kaphic person who can use the acids. So inaccurate information can also come from a general practitioner, a doctor, a physician who doesn't have any knowledge of the microbiome's contribution to your health. So listening to a doctor saying, take all these medications and eat right, you know, what does eat right mean? You know, there's not a lot of education there, and it can get people into trouble. So what I wanted to, yeah.
We're not seeing the slides advance. We're still on the first slide.
Oh, okay. Well. Thank you for that. So I was advancing from the screen with the Zoom and not from the slides. See, I told you I was going to break something, Michelle. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about here is the sort of that the mind-blowing portion of our call tonight, which is, what is it, this microbiome? Where is it? What does it do? How do I take care of it? How is one part different than the other? One family different than the other? Eventually, I will bring it back around to the spring cleanse. So this is basically an overview of the 500 species, categories of species that occupy your gut, from your stomach all the way to the end of the colon. There's a lot, right? And each of the organs possesses a different family, a different species for a different reason. So if you look at the small intestine, then you can see it's the mushy part in the center, the light tan color. It has a very short transit time, and so when the food leaves the gut, passes the duodenum and enters the small intestine, it's the longest intestine that you have. It's several miles of intestine that the food has to get through. It's bundled in a liquid called chyme that is starting to break it down with acids. So it moves very fast. It's in your small intestine of very little time, moves quite rapidly. So those microbes that are located in your small intestine, they're not very diverse. They have not as many species as the large intestine, and they're less dynamic. So they're not very capable. They do work with oxygen. So there's still oxygen in your gut in the small intestine. So they are aerobic, you know, so meaning that they do breathe air. So they move quite rapidly. And that's where you're going to find that lactobacillus, the kind that you find in yogurt. You know, that's the strain that you're going to make yogurt with. You can also find Staphylococcus, Streptococcus in that small intestine. If there's going to be an outbreak of strep or that's where it's going to happen in that one. People who come down with an infection of staph infection or strep infection, it developed in their small intestine. And we have those bacteria, they're normal to us. When we get infected, we get too many of them and they pass through the intestinal wall and get into our blood, and eventually we have a full-blown infection. So very important that bacteria stay in their home. Bacteria that is not in their home causes side effects. Bacteria that stays in the home does really good work. So what I wanted to tell you about this very important area is the typical calorie-dense Western diet can induce expansion of microbes that promote digestion and absorption of high-fat foods. And these bacteria can multiply in 24 to 48 hours in the small intestine in response to the consumption of high-fat foods. So what that basically says is we now know that whatever you eat, let's say high-fat foods, your body responds by creating the proper microbes to digest it, which would seem like really good news, right? If you eat something that is fatty or polluted or whatever, rotten, you know, your body responds with the right kind of microbe, populates the gut, and deals with what you just ate. And when at first glance, when you see that, you think, well, that's good news. You know, I can indulge and my body will respond and digest it. But it's not actually good news. And I go on with a quote. Those digestive enzymes break down dietary fat, enabling the rapid absorption of calorie-dense food. Concurrently, the microbes release bioactive compounds, and these compounds stimulate absorptive cells in the intestines to package and transport fat for absorption. And over time, the steady presence of these microbes can lead to overnutrition and obesity. So basically what this paper, and this is just a very recent paper that's trying to explain why the American diet is toxic. And what they determined was that when you feed your gut an element, Roxy is really determined to knock the computer over, so I'm sorry. You're distracted. I'm trying to get her to stop. When you continuously eat foods that are not in line with your nature and with your nutritional needs, your body will continuously adapt and create the microbes needed to digest that food, carry the nutrients through the intestinal walls to the organs with bioreactive foods, and then bring the fuel back in. And so it becomes a cycle. And the more that you feed the body this type of food, the more microbes you breed to break down this type of inappropriate food. And this is what's leading to poor nutrition and related obesity. If you give that person then rice, vegetables, mung bean, they don't have the right microbes to break it down. And if you stop feeding that person the foods that they have been eating, the inappropriate foods, the microbes are going to overpopulate and scream and say, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, take me to McDonald's. And that's called a craving. Those cravings don't come from your brain, they come from microbes that have been overpopulated to eat a food that you are no longer feeding it. So we have a decision to make. Does that, I mean, a couple of questions about Ozempic. So Ozempic, these shots were designed to shut down that messaging, to shut down the enzymes that make that communication happen. And at first glance, that sounds like a good idea, right? Well, when you shut down nature, the nature of messaging between your microbes and the environment, you have shut down the whole thing, not just the cells that are asking for McDonald's. You've shut down the entire chain reaction. So no, Ozempic is going to make your system stop. And then eventually malnutrition starts. Right now, the kidney replacement list as a result of damage from these shots, there are several hundred people now on kidney replacement lists from damage from these shots. So doctors don't tell you that. It's in the little insert that says the risks are kidney failure. But I have a cousin who's on that shot, and when I told her that, she said she was willing to accept that risk, that she really just wanted to be thin again. So this is what the control between your microbes and your brain is really, really intense. Speaking of that, let's look at the large intestine. That's the larger, the one that frames the smaller one. It's a darker orange, and you can see that colon and appendix and the ileum, you can see that the quantity of microbes in those and the variety of microbes in the large intestine is a great deal bigger than the smaller intestine. They are anaerobic. They don't work with oxygen. They move a lot slower. Once the food particles as nutrients get into the large and colon, things slow down a great deal. They're more diverse. You can see the list there on the left, that we just have so many more types there. And here's the interesting part you need to know. The large intestine feeds on foods that are fibrous, so fibrous material. The food has been broken down in the chyme, and a lot of nutrients have gone through the walls of your intestine into your system already by the time these nutrients get into your large intestine. But fibers cannot go through your intestine into your body, into the blood system. They have to stay inside the colon. And the creators of our bodies was so smart to make that happen. And I'll tell you why. It's a great mystery. Why do we need fiber? Why do humans need fiber? This is something that the keto folks need to understand about how the large intestine works. So the microbes that eat fibrous materials and ferment those materials are all living in the large intestine. They create, from this fermentation of fibrous materials, the short chain fatty acids, which is the energy source for the colon. So why does the colon need energy? So here we get to the poop question. Somebody asked me this question: why am I not pooping anymore on the cleanse? I'm just not producing the mass that I used to. The reason is, and I know this is going to be mind-blowing, but the colon was never meant to hold feces. The colon was designed for emptiness. In the Vedas, it says the human who poops eats too much. That we are not designed to fill the toilet twice a day. That is the American diet. If you eat enough protein, enough carbohydrates, and enough fat in the right amount for your body type, and you've got the right microbes and the right hydration and the right movement, breath work, exercise, and you're moving mass through and into the bloodstream, you're going to be releasing a very few small nuggets of feces once or twice a day. That's it. So the colon was designed for emptiness. And now that we understand that, we understood that 10,000 years ago, but now that we're understanding it today, and we understand that the large intestine creates fatty chains that provide energy to the colon, it's so that the colon can instruct all of the activity going all the way back up to the duodenum, and it's called peristalsis. The movement of your entire intestinal tract is demanded by the colon. The instruction, the messaging for your intestines to move and empty and send things downward comes from the colon. This is one reason why I've said over and over again, if you have food in the colon or large intestine or even your small intestine, don't eat. You have to wait until you pass everything out and you're empty again before you eat. Because if you eat, you have food at the upper part of the GI tract, and you have food at the lower part of the GI tract, the GI tract will stop. It cannot function if it's trying to digest food from the top and empty food from the bottom. It's just too much information. So it slows down and becomes sluggish. And that food that's in there becomes rotted material and enters the bloodstream as toxins, or called AMA. And then you're dealing with it for months. One bad meal that you go to bed with that you don't digest, that turns into compost entering your bloodstream, could take as much as 28 days to get out of your bloodstream and your tissues. So short chain fatty acids, it's brilliant, right? Fibers. The folks that are on a keto diet, and I myself have been on a keto diet to get over the skin cancer I had to be keto for 6 weeks to go without, to get into ketosis without the glucose. But those who choose that lifestyle soon lose the health of their thyroid. They need thyroid medication, they lose their hair, and they are on laxatives forever if they want their peristalsis to work. So we have to take in fiber in order for that to work. And plant-based fiber, whole grains, fruits and vegetables and legumes are the highest fibrous foods that we can access. They're actually the cheapest protein fibrous materials that we can purchase. So they're economical, easily to digest, easy to cook, easy to keep in the home. So that's that. Okay, so here's the other thing. I am a big fan of Candace Pert. She wrote the book Molecules of Emotion. And she's the one who proved that the microbes that we have and the enzymes we have in the brain, she also found them in the gut. And then she figured out that they were transmitting themselves up and down between the brain and the body via the vagus nerve. And these short chain fatty acids create energy, and that's what keeps your vagus nerve running. The superhighway between the brain and the gut runs on short chain fatty acids, which are created in your colon and your large intestine. I think that is a mind-blowing situation. I think, how in the world does the large intestine create short chain fatty acid that can come back up into the vagus nerve and make this highway work? Like, how does the body do that, you know, in the bloodstream, right? Well, here's a fun story. Those of us who have had children, this is kind of a question maybe that some of us had while we were having our children, but just a few minutes before you have a baby vaginal delivery, a message, an enzyme travels from the uterus into the colon and says, release the cell. And a cell comes out of the colon, travels into the bloodstream of the mother, travels all the way upward to the heart and to the nipple and says, release the milk. The message for your body to produce breast milk comes from the colon. Wow, I know, just everybody's head was like, wow. So there's a whole universe of knowledge that we, as modern human beings, have not tapped into. But here's another mind-blowing thing. All of this is known already. It was put into the Ayurveda text 10,000 years ago. We're not rediscovering these things. We're only proving these things. They knew about microbes. They knew about our alliance with the environment. That's why my work in the environment, my book, Yogicology, Spirit in the Soil, the microbes you see on your screen right now, all of those names of those funky bacteria, you got them from the dirt. We get these things from the dirt, and the dirt gets these things back from humans. When we die, we're supposed to put these bacteria back in the dirt, but instead we're burning bodies and we're exhausting the planet, robbing it of all these microbes needed to grow new plants. It's a cycle. We get it from the dirt, we give it to the dirt. We are the dirt. We are built of the same compounds that the dirt is built. So the more we poison the dirt, we're poisoning ourselves. The more we put synthetics in ourselves, we're putting synthetics in the soil, and it's a short cycle before there is no more soil for our children. So I'll get off my soapbox on that issue. So that was for me a wonderful, there's a whole lot more, but here's one thing I wanted to talk about concerning each of the areas of the digestion. So the 6 tastes, or the 6 rasa, there are 6 segments to your digestive tract, 6 segments that have to be satisfied with nutrients. Why? I mean, let's say, why can't I just have a tuna sandwich and it makes my mouth happy and it makes my colon happy, right? No. Each of the 6 segments of your digestive tract require a different type of nutrient to remain healthy. And by healthy, I mean the GI system is built up tissue, just like your skin is a tissue. Your eyes are tissue, your fingernails are tissue. your GI tract is built of a particular type of tissue. Each section is a little bit different. Each of the 6 sections is a little bit different, requiring different nutrients. Now refer you back to what I said when we first opened. It's not you digesting, it's the microbes that are digesting. Each of the 6 sections of your GI tract has a different family of microbes digesting different flavors based on what that system needs from the food. So if you look at the colon, it needs astringent foods like apple, you know, how the apple gets you right in the cheek, or the pomegranate, you know, these are astringent foods. The pancreas, liver, spleen, just above the colon, they need olives and turmeric, the bitter stuff, bitter coffee. This is why when you drink coffee, you immediately need to go to the bathroom, because you've stimulated that portion of your upper colon. So as you go through this list, you can see that the foods that the upper lungs, and from here to the upper lungs, needs is the sweet flavor of berries and chocolate. You know, when you take those things in, it helps to improve your development of saliva, and saliva digests proteins and carbohydrates. It starts here in the mouth. Digestion starts right here in the mouth. You have different kinds of microbes here in the mouth than you have in your small intestines. So your diet needs to be varied by dosha. Not every dosha should be eating everything on the system. I'm saying your dosha has each of these families of flavors. So the microbes, they're different families, different purposes, and when they eat different things. So this is a sample plate. Let's say this is your meal between 10 and 2. When I say you're going to have a complex meal, means you're going to have all 6 flavors that satisfy all 6 regions of your GI tract. So all 6 types of microbial families are all satisfied: breeding, sleeping, teaching their young, they're growing up, they're doing the right things. So that's a full plate of all 6 flavors. And if you want to get really complicated, you would eat them in this order. If you want the microbes to react as they should, you would be starting your meal with something sweet like peas, and then you would eat the sour thing, you know, I vote wine, but you could have cranberries. You can have the salty thing. As you move down the lungs, you can have salty. Then you eat the pungent thing, or you maybe have some horseradish on the side of as a chutney. And then you eat the green leafy veg, and you finish with some stewed apples or a few pomegranate seeds. So that's a full plate. And that's how at the ashram, they usually serve a full thali. And sometimes Surajnath the Guruji will say, start here. And he'll say, eat this first. Eat your sweets first. So, or eat, you know, in India, they don't serve coffee after, because if you see where coffee follows, you know, it's in the pancreas, they would have served coffee or chai before the meal is offered, and they would have sugar in the coffee. So there's your sweet. Okay. Not to get too complicated with that, but okay, so then on to the light diet. So now you know you have all 6 flavors, you're eating between 10 and 2, you're satisfying all the microbes because they're getting ready for the big flush. You're treating them really well. You might have a couple of outliers that just won't, you know, let go, or, you know, a couple of families that are still overpopulated or underpopulated. But I wanted to give you what a light diet looks like right now. This is the same light diet that is prescribed to you after the cleanse. It's basically what we call, and you'll read about it in tomorrow's newsletter, we call this first meal. And by first meal, we're not talking about you, we're talking about your microbes. The first meal that you feed your microbes, as we talked about, you know, with these microbiome, that you want them to be digesting healthy food accurately and not recognize junk or things that are not desirous. And the reason is so that you don't crave them. You know, after I did this for a couple of years, and also I had to do the keto, but what I noticed was that to be free of a desire for wheat and sugar and caffeine is so freeing, not only for the budget, but it's just so great not to be owned by these things. If sugar owns your microbes, if you have microbes in your gut screaming for sugar every day, it's not possible to function. It's harder to detox from sugar than heroin. And I've seen the movie People Getting Off Heroin. It's a mess. So getting off sugar can be a real mess. That's why I told you to warn your family, you know. It's almost as bad as nicotine. So the other thing I wanted you to see here is this picture. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that your intestinal walls are only 1 cell thick. So this is the wall of your intestinal tract, and what you see going through the tract there are those short chain fatty acids that are going to be carrying those buckets of enzymes through the wall and out into your blood, and then transmit that to your organs in other regions of the body. So I like how the illustrator designed them as sort of like a corkscrew, because they can get through the wall of the intestines between, you know, one cell wall. Shouldn't be that hard, right? But your intestines don't let fibers through. The fibers are kept inside your large intestine to ferment and break down. So I really appreciated that. That photo seemed to be quite accurate. Okay, so I think we'll stop there. This list is in the newsletter tomorrow that Wendy's been sending out in such an excellent, consistent way. We're getting ready right now. We're doing the Basti. We did the Basti to this morning or tonight for the first time, so we have 2 more days of that. Then we have the 1 day of rest and eat a normal light diet on Saturday, and then we'll meet on Sunday morning for the Shangpang Shalana. And I provide lots and lots of education for you on the Shang. You know, in the newsletter, there's lots of videos. Of course, it's in your booklet. But if you have any questions or apprehensions, you should absolutely reach out to myself or Caitlin, and we can answer your questions. So we'll end the meeting now, at least the video, and I'll see you at the weekend for our big flush.